Hello guys, welcome to the video. I wanted today to talk about Miles Morales Spider-Man. Not only from the movie Into the Spider-Verse, but I also wanted to talk about the video game Spider-Man Miles Morales for the PS5 and PS4. And I wanted to focus on something very important. I think for many of you, Miles Morales is the epitome of what it means to be a black man, what it means to literally live in a rough neighborhood and don the colors of Spider-Man. And to many of you, he is one of those heroes that you identify with. He's a quirky little dude, that gets bit by a spider. And he is loved by everybody because he always tries to help everybody. And I'm not here to talk about his origin story. I'm here to talk about the other part of Miles Morales that Insomniac Games did a good job in reminding us of. But the movies and sometimes even the fandom forget about. And it is that Miles Morales is a Puerto Rican descendant. And this is overlooked many times by the fandom because to many of the fandom, it doesn't matter really. It doesn't matter that he dons the blue, red, and white of the Puerto Rican flag, but he also dons the red, white, and blue from the American flag. And he also has the culture of African Americans here in the United States. So his full name even says, I am Miles Gonzalo Morales. So he has an English name, a Spanish name, and an English, Spanish last name. It is amazing for us Puerto Ricans to see Miles Morales be this amazing hero. And in one of the videos talking about Miles Morales, I think it was a soundtrack from the Spider-Man game or Into the Spider-Verse. I don't remember very well, but I had this guy said, yeah, sure, let's blackwash all our white characters so that you guys can create your own. And I respectfully disagree with that. I think that Miles Morales was one of the black Hispanic characters that was well done. He wasn't forced down our throats. He wasn't blackwashed. He literally was put in a story that was building over time and that people wanted to see. People wanted to see a black Spider-Man. And we finally got Miles Morales because of that. And I think the fact that they made him half black, half Hispanic was a genius move. For many that don't know Puerto Rican culture and don't understand it, we have a lot of African American roots in our island. Many of the music we listen to has African American roots. Many say that Puerto Ricans are guests in the hip hop world, when in reality, our hip hop world is derived from African American culture, just the same as many of our traditional music has been derived from African American roots. Like many other places in Puerto Rico, we had slavery. So many of our African American brothers and sisters in the island, they literally brought a lot to our culture. The dresses, the body types, the music, the words, like for example, tumbao, bomba, sancocho, all those things derive from African American culture. Many of you don't even know what that means. So, bomba is a traditional music in Puerto Rico that uses drums and that is very African American oriented. The same as to sancocho. Sancocho used to be little vegetables that people that were slaves back then will grab from the leftovers and cook a meal that looks like a soup, but that will keep them healthy, that will keep them working in the crops of sugarcane and coffee. And many people don't understand that about Puerto Rican culture. We are white, we are African, and we are Native American. And we blended those three cultures together into one huge melting pot. That is Puerto Rico. Later in the years, we have had Dominicans who are mainly black skin join our island as well, which has made our population more diverse and bigger than ever before. And I think the fact that they made Miles Morales, African American and Puerto Rican makes a lot of sense. Like, for example, our music derives from hip hop. Reggaeton derives from reggae. And then we have all those style like trap and hip hop and all the rap, everything that comes from the African American community, Puerto Ricans do in their own way. We actually made reggaeton a worldwide thing. It wasn't just, the fact that Americans and other cultures and nations were bringing that sort of rhythm to the world, but Puerto Ricans originated it and made it big. The same with salsa. Salsa took a lot away from soul and many other rhythms of African and Latin culture. So it is an amazing thing that Miles Morales is this character that represents both. I love when you're playing the PS5 game and you're walking on the street, and normally Peter Parker will do like, hey, what's up? Like a nod to the Spider-Man 2 meme. But Miles Morales, not only does he say hi, he dances salsa, which is a Puerto Rican thing. When you go into his home in the video game, he has a Puerto Rican flag. He has an album that his father and his mother love to listen to, that is salsa. And you see that in the game, Insomniac made sure that one part of his culture didn't overshadow the other. Harlem has a lot of African Americans and Puerto Ricans in the story, in the video game, and that makes it feel great. Before I came to Washington State, New York was our go-to. To me, New York was Puerto Rico part 2. Just on a bigger scale. Like Puerto Ricans there, we call them New Yorkers, it's one of those things that we're proud of. Like my grandfather was a New York Yankees fan, probably because when he was a kid, he was taken to one of the baseball parks in New York City. When I went to New York City for the first time in 2014, it felt like home. And I think Miles, being a New Yorker himself and being an African American, has made New York his city, and I love his character. When you're raised as a Puerto Rican, even the worst bullies in Puerto Rican culture, we are taught to respect. We're taught to be kind to one another. If somebody needs help, we are taught to help them. We are taught to be tough because our streets are tough. Our streets are difficult. There's a lot of micro cartels going around, destroying lives, bringing drugs to the neighborhoods. And there's a lot of poverty. And I think seeing Miles in an apartment that is so reflective of what our houses in Puerto Rico look like. And not only our houses, when I went to New York and I had this Puerto Rican friend that I went to visit, that's how their apartment looked. And the fact that you see that is such an amazing thing. Seeing a Puerto Rican and an African American married is not a weird thing in New York. One of my best friends from back in the day, his wife was African American or is African American, and he is a Puerto Rican. And the way that the cultures blend so perfectly. You have the same issues in Puerto Rico that you have in African American culture. You have people getting young girls in tough situations with having babies and then leaving them so that they become single mothers. And you have all the same troubles, the drugs, the fights, the crimes, the violence. But in the good way, you have the good traits, the warmth, the community, the sense of community, the hugs, the music, the flavor, the food, everything is just so amazing from both cultures. I have experienced it myself, and Miles Morales and his stories bring that to the forefront. What it is to be a Puerto Rican. You know, like, for example, I was walking just now, I was playing the video game, just trying to get into the zone to talk about his character in this video. And when you're walking on the street, sometimes you hit people by mistake. And the first thing he said was in Spanish, and he said permiso, which means excuse me, which is something that my mom taught me when I was a kid in Puerto Rico. If you're going to walk into a place and you see that there's a bunch of people and there's no way to go around, you have to ask for permiso. You have to say, hey, excuse me, can I pass through? That just reminded me so much of my upbringing. His mom, Rio Morales, in the video game uses the Puerto Rican flag to become a councilwoman. And that's the thing. Sometimes I don't agree with liberal America about, you know, the way they see culture, the way they attack the other side of the spectrum. But there's also good things about that. There's also things that you can salvage. And I think the fact that we're trying to bring these cultures to the forefront, that it's not just white America, is white America, Hispanic America, African Americans, is European Americans. You have all these cultures that need to be put on the forefront, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're not less of an American if you have a family member that is Mexican, or you have a family member that is Puerto Rican, or you have a family member that is European. If you were born here and you love this country and you love the opportunities that this country offers, and you want to make this place a lot better, like Miles Morales and his neighborhood in Harlem, then hell, man, like, that's good. And I think that's one of the things we forget, that with all this progress, with capitalism and everything, you know, there's things that need to be put on the forefront. And I think that this video game respects American culture, but it also respects Puerto Rican culture. It also respects African American culture. And I love that. I love Miles' character so much. You know, when he was trying to help, spoilers to those who don't know, when he was trying to help, you know, his friend, the Tinkerer. He was trying to help his friend and trying to get her out of that dark area of her life. Even in the beginning of the video game, you know, he saw his neighborhood. He has his headphones on, which is very common both in Puerto Rico and African American culture. And you just walk in the streets, and then he saw somebody struggling with a sofa, and he went and he helped the guy with the sofa. You see that kindness, that loving nature. And that's something that I love about Miles Morales. He also sorted out having a community, pretty much. He had Finn, he has his friend Geiki, something like that. Yeah, his name is weird. Um, so you see this type of ambience when he invites his mom Rio invites Finn to the Christmas Nochebuena and Christmas Eve, and they eat pasteles, and you see all that. It just makes me feel so happy that Insomniac Games did, and I want to see that more in Across the Spider-Verse, the second Miles Morales animation film. I want to see his Puerto Rican roots a lot more. We focus so much on, his African American heritage. I want Hispanics to be proud of him too, of that character that we created, that we pushed for. We didn't mean to replace Peter Parker. I mean, I am a Puerto Rican white kid. I love Spider-Man. I love Peter Parker. I mean, I never want anybody to say, oh, I'm better than Peter Parker. I don't want that. But I also don't want people to be like, oh, yeah, Miles Morales is a bad character because he's, he replaced Peter Parker. No. I want you to see it for how it is. If Batman died and he was training another kid, a Robin, for example, to take his place if he ever died, and this Robin puts on the cape and becomes Batman, he would have earned it. And that's what I want people to see. And I think it bothers me that people continue to say, oh, that's blackwashing. Listen, I get it. There's some characters that when you change their ethnicity, you have ruined the character, the backstory, everything. Like sometimes they force it. Miles Morales was a comic book for a few years before he ever went into the theater and became an animation movie, and until he became a video game. So let Miles grow. I'm excited for Spider-Man 2, the video game. I hope the MCU or Sony gives Miles Morales a movie. Either Tom Holland's Spider-Man teaches him or Andrew Garfield. I will prefer Andrew Garfield because I think Andrew Garfield that Spider-Man needs something to teach, somebody to look for, somebody to protect, somebody to teach, somebody to help, and somebody that helps him not feel lonely. I hope he finds his Mary Jane too, right? I hope that character, and we make The Amazing Spider-Man 3. Hashtag make The Amazing Spider-Man 3. Please, Sony, please. But anyways, if they ever do The Amazing Spider-Man 3, I wish Miles Morales was involved in it and they created his character to help Andrew's Peter Parker, because he's old enough now. We can either pick up right where we left off after Gwen's death, or we can just literally make something further down the line, continuing when Andrew Garfield met Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and then he can continue from there. But I hope that in both cases, in Across the Spider-Verse, and if they make a, real life Miles Morales, they remember that part of his identity lies here. And I hope that we get to see that a lot more often. I'm proud that he's an African American. I'm proud that he's the first Black Spider-Man, but I'm more proud that he's a Puerto Rican Spider-Man. And even Bad Bunny put him in one of his concerts intros. Like, we are from Pe You know, like we love Puerto Rico so much, and Miles is a love letter to Puerto Ricans. There's always a Miles Morales anywhere. There's a guy that might come and help you. You know, there's a kid that may come and talk to you. And just inspired by Miles Morales and inspired by my Puerto Rican heritage, I want to do whatever I can to help. And I hope that you guys do too. So at some point, I'll be looking for Puerto Rican benefit charities out there, and I want to help as much as I can to make Puerto Rico a better place. Puerto Rico has become a very difficult place to live in, more so than when I lived there. And I want Puerto Rico to get back on its feet after Hurricane Maria, the earthquakes, and COVID. So, anyways, guys, I think I am done talking about Miles Morales, Puerto Rico, African American culture for now. But I am super excited to see what they do with this character in the animated film, Spider-Man 2 video game, and also if they ever do a live adaptation of the character. Make sure to like this video, make sure to subscribe, turn on the notification button so that you get notified when I will drop another video. And I hope to see you guys soon.